11 a.m. at 212 West Cypress Street in Compton as we fan out to clean up our city.
The first 50 KBLA listeners to hit our website at KBLA1580.com will receive a free KBLA tee when you join us on Saturday morning, April 20th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 212 West Cypress Street in Compton. Now, no show, no shirt, but sign up at KBLA1580.com right now to help us clean up Compton as part of Earth Day 2024.
We will see you on Saturday, April the 20th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 212 West Cypress Street in the city of Compton to do our part for Earth Day 2024.
We are KBLA Talk 1580, caring about the climate, caring about the community, cleaning up Compton.
I'm just trying to process what just happened. I'm just trying to express what I'm feeling when the pressure gets too intense. Burn some incense, stop and take a deep breath. Really is that holding it back like a sting shot, ayy. Holding it back like hair ties, ayy. Pulling my shirt, just let me go. Oh, clocking the drill, stopping the flow. You already know what time it is, don't need a Rolex. Do you see the sign? Tell me, do I need to protest? Oh, you always keep on slowing up the progress.
KBLA Talk 1580. It is a lot to process, but I'm excited to welcome into the conversation this morning a writer and data scientist. He's interested in science and society. Right now he's working on a book about, actually right now we're going to be talking about his latest book, The Weight of Nature, How a Changing Climate Changes Our Brains. But he's been published by The Guardian, The Atlantic, The Economist. His work has been syndicated or republished in Mother Jones, Vox, Salon, The New Republic, and much, much more. He's worked as a computational neuroscience environmental journalist. He's worked on homeless policy. And most recently, he led the data analysis and program evaluation team for homelessness programs at Pierce County, Washington. Clay Aldern, welcome. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Man, I had to play a little her this morning because, I haven't admittedly made it all the way through your book yet, but from what I'm reading, it is a lot to process. It's like so many pieces of this climate emergency that just never even occurred to me. I guess I've always thought externally, things getting hotter, environments, can we breathe or can we not breathe? Are we taking in lead poisoning? Are we able to process all the microplastics in terms of our physical response, but not, I know the brain is part of our physical response, but not in terms of all of these other outcomes which we may not be tracking.
Yeah, I think that's really common, right? The fact that so many of these internal effects of something like heat or something like air pollution we're not paying attention to, simply because the brain is really good at kind of just chugging along and doing its thing and operating as this invisible force within us. But when you do pay attention to it, you see a lot of these effects manifesting in there too.
Yeah, you started with heat, and there's a story in this book that where you talk about a guy murdering another guy, right? And you ask who is responsible for that murder? Who killed Tyson Morlock is the chapter. And one of the things I found remarkable is because on the surface, obviously, the guy that stabbed him is the guy that killed him, but you break it down to all these other possible factors, and including heat, which is not.
That's right.
I mean, and you can ask any guy in a street gang and in a hot city like Chicago or Phoenix, and they'll say, yeah, people fight more when it's hot. But we don't think about it. I never thought about it in terms of the climate emergency.
Right. And I think that's pretty typical, right? We're not asking the question, how or why is something like the climate emergency or something like a heat wave writ large, how or why is that acting on our behavior, right? Because it's true. You ask anyone, are you more aggressive in the heat, right? What does it feel like on a hot day? And, the answer is, yeah, I am a little quicker to the trigger, right? I do feel a little more ornery, a little more aggressive when it's hot out. And what behavioral economists and cognitive neuroscientists and all the people out there who are beginning to kind of zoom the lens in on that feeling of aggression in the heat, what they're finding is this is a universal shared experience, and there's some pretty good science out there that does answer the question of why we're more aggressive in the heat. And so this is kind of a book that seeks to pull apart some of those effects.
I mean, in this case, the guy that was stabbed, you kind of, the first impulse is, oh, well, he's just making excuses. This guy, they were fighting over whatever they were fighting over and he killed him. But when you break it down, you really show how this is a phenomenon that goes in beyond human beings. It's even fish that are more grouchy when they're really hot.
Oh, it's fish, it's spiders, it's monkeys, it's pretty much anywhere you look, you can find an imprint of heat on behavior and in particular on aggression. It really does appear to be the case that pretty much anything with a nervous system, anything with a brain, does appear to act more impulsively and more aggressive at higher temperatures. And so this story about Tyson Morlock, who, unfortunately was killed by a friend of his in the middle of a heat wave in Portland a couple of years ago. The story of Tyson's death for me is a story about decision making. It's a story about why it is that we do the things we do. And in the case of the man who killed him, we can ask, why is it that you made that decision? And in fact, can we even consider it to have been a decision, right? If there are so many forces out there acting on our behavior, what does it mean to even quote unquote decide to do anything in the first place, right? And this is not to say, hey, this man wasn't at fault, he wasn't holding the knife, right? All of that, of course, is true, and you're right. Our colloquial understanding of this death is accurate, right? The guy named Mark, was holding the knife, and he did stab his friend. And at the same time, when you zoom the lens out a little bit and you ask what else was going on, understanding all of the forces out there in the world, right? Both personal and environmental, and socioeconomic, and right, all the manners that different vectors of influence combine to affect behavior, right? To affect decision making. They throw that act of stabbing another man. They throw that act into some interesting light. We have to ask what it means to make a decision at all.
Is Clayton Aldern, is there a range of temperature that human beings or fishes or whatever? I mean, obviously, you if you boil, you die. But is there a range within what we can survive that we are programmed to deal with? And could we be approaching a point where we're outside of that range. I mean, I'm in California as we're talking, and I'm thinking of these, recent summers where desert days are in the 120s. And I live in LA proper, in South LA. I never needed air conditioning, but now there are a fair number of summer days where I'm well into the 90s. And I wish I had air in my house.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm in Seattle, which is a city in the country that has one of the lowest per capita rates of air conditioning ownership, and all of a sudden that's becoming a real issue here because the summers are indeed getting so warm that it's almost foolish to be living without AC.
Yeah, because you can actually die. I mean, you can actually die from heat.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And it is becoming riskier and riskier to be alive in this world without access to some kind of cooling infrastructure, because people do have a habitable range. People do have, a very narrow biophysical window that allows us to function as we're meant to function. And after a certain point, we simply can't function anymore, right? After a certain point, you don't have enough sweat glands to cool yourself down, right? There is a literal physical limit when heat combines with humidity, such that you're effectively not able to sweat anymore, and that's a real problem for health. Now, is that what we're talking about in this conversation? Not necessarily, right? This question about, is there a range of comfort, for example?
Yeah.
And outside of that range, what happens to behavior? The answer there, is a little more complicated. And the only reason it is because in addition to the fact that while it's true that there's a temperate range in which people are really good at being people, right? And you probably know what this feels like. It's like, 75 degrees or so. Maybe a little lower than that. Basically, when it feels good outside, that's the range that humans are supposed to be operating in.
Mm-hmm.
All of these effects that we're talking about, the discomfort we feel in the heat, and any kind of aggression or lack of focused thinking that comes from heat, right? That's a signal that you're operating outside of your comfort zone. Literally, that's an evolutionary biological signal that says, I'm outside of that range. And yet, it's also true that different people all over the world have slightly different set points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is warmer in some places than others. And it's not just the fact that people exposed to warmer temperatures writ large have some kind of outsized aggression effect or something, right? That's not the case. The reality is it's when you're experiencing deviations from your zone of comfort that you've adapted to, that's where we really start to see some of the scarier stuff manifest. Mm-hmm. So while there does appear to be this evolutionarily set range of comfort for people, different people all over the world, basically have a little bit of the wiggle room there insofar as we can adapt to our surroundings, right? We can adapt to different climates. But we are not infinitely adaptable.
Clayton Page Aldern is my guest. The Weight of Nature, the book. We are on a climate justice mission on KBLA Talk 1580. Let's talk about it.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power. KBLA Talk 1580 is the fastest growing talk radio station in Southern California. Home to 50,000 watts and an audience reach of 12 million listeners. KBLA Talk 1580 is a pioneer for Black audio content, including our groundbreaking $2 million climate justice campaign and the most loyal, influential audience. According to an independent research study by the polling firm Aviterus, for the second consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 is the most trustworthy, reliable, and credible news source for Black audiences and beyond in Southern California. Let KBLA Talk 1580 power your advertising dollars. Our omni-channel custom marketing solutions are specifically tailored to connect with your ideal target audience. We leverage audio, podcasts, streaming, digital, social media, and local activations to get your message out to the Black community. Get in touch with our advertising team today at advertising@KBLA1580.com. That's advertising at KBLA1580.com. KBLA 1580. We've got your Black.
Febreze.
So my home is also my office. And before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up, then spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day.
Breathe happy, Febreze. La 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 la.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
We used to argue about whose turn it was to clean the gutters, but then I had Leaf Filter gutter protection installed.
Wait, I told you Leaf Filter had free inspections and estimates and a lifetime guarantee.
Meaning we never have to argue about whose turn it is to clean the gutters again.
But I visited leaffilter.com/beacon first.
No, I did.
It doesn't matter who. Visit leaffilter.com/beacon to schedule your free gutter inspection and get up to 30% off today.
See representative for warranty details. Promotion is 20% off plus a 10% senior or military discount. One discount per household.
Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
I do thank you. 800-920-1580. If you have something to say on this conversation with Clayton Page Aldern, The Weight of Nature is the book, and it's really making me think in ways both good and bad, ways both good and scary, I should say. So you're talking about this range of comfort that human beings have in terms of what we can handle in heat. LA Times, I think it was last year, had a great article about all the deaths that are happening from heat that we don't report. We just think someone died of old age or whatever disease they had or whatever, not realizing that they could have, actually died from heat. And but I was really also asking you about a range of functionality, I guess. I was really surprised to read here you said that even, using the example of the post office, where when they found that people's problematic behavior spiked with heat, it followed them even when they got out of the heat, right? So I guess it brings up for me is not just when do I feel good, but when am I actually experience diminished functionality, which I may or may not even recognize as happening to me as a human at that moment. Mr. Aldern, are you there?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a kind of scary thing to come to terms with, the fact that some of these effects of higher temperatures, they basically, they can follow us inside. They can follow us into air conditioning because it takes a while for our bodies to come back to that level of normality. You mentioned this post office example, right? And that's an instance in which these researchers basically found that on a hotter day, the experience of both postal workers who worked outside and inside post offices, right? So the people delivering mail in the heat, but also those who were inside these air-conditioned buildings on hot days, both of these classes of workers experienced an uptick in racial discrimination claims, sexual harassment claims, right? Union grievances ticked up on these days. There appears to be this really kind of insidious effect of heat in terms of the way that we relate to one another, right? You can also look at immigration judges, for example, who have been shown to, on hotter days, be more likely to rule against an asylum applicant in the courtroom. And this is to do nothing with where they're living, right? The judges who live in hotter climates versus those who live in somewhat more temperate climates, making more aggressive or impulsive decisions. It's literally comparing judges' own behavior to themselves over time. These researchers have found that on hotter days, judges are effectively less lenient in their decision making.
Mm. So, I mean, I guess this idea of a hellscape, of a very hot future with all kinds of mutant bugs everywhere and, diseases running rampant because many things thrive in warmer temperatures that are problematic for humans. That wasn't really so new to me, sadly. But I think the idea of degeneration of the brain that we're not even aware of, whether it be in decision-making processes or even some of these diseases that impact our brain function, that was more a new area for me. And it just makes you wonder what the implications are for things like Alzheimer's, dementia, all of these, brain conditions that we seem to be seeing such a huge rise of in this era.
Yeah. When you're a neuroscientist working on something like neurodegeneration, you're studying the processes by which the brain deteriorates under various environmental stressors or toxins or whatever it may be. How do you study that? Well, maybe you have a rat, right? Maybe you have a lab rat, literally, and over the course of some kind of experiment, you're selectively exposing that animal to some kind of toxin, and you're watching what happens and taking very careful measurements over time. That is not the case for people, right? We are just living in this world, constantly exposed to a kind of chronic soup of pollutants and toxins and environmental stressors. And what neuroscientists and epidemiologists appear to be finding is that the chronic exposures, even if they're low level over time, right, even if it's just a little bit of air pollution here and there, right, or a little bit of ozone exposure here and there, the fact of the matter is that chronic low-level exposure of many of these pollutants and toxins does appear to be related to neurodegeneration in people, right, to these dementias like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So that's some really unfortunate and frightening stuff, because a lot of those types of conditions, right, a lot of neurodegenerative conditions, they don't manifest until later in life. And so we're in this unfortunate natural experiment wherein we're being exposed to this kind of stuff all the time. And scientists have begun to put together this evidence base that suggests these exposures to the various neurotoxins that are a function of air pollution and various forms of environmental degradation, they may be impacting our brains, and yet we may not be aware personally of the manners in which those conditions might manifest until effectively it's too late to do anything about it, right? And so that's the concern here, that we're in the middle of this grand experiment effectively on ourselves, and we're not going to see the worst of the effects until 20, 40 years from now or so.
We're a minute and a half out from news, traffic, and sports. We'll continue on the other side. I wonder if you can just sort of break down what a neurotoxin is. I mean, this idea that it's not, that they're coming from many different places. Things we eat, things we breathe, things we drink. Explain what a neurotoxin is.
Yeah, it's really anything that is bad for brain tissue, right? And to just give one example, you're familiar with the notion that mercury is probably not something you're going to come into contact with too frequently, and that's because we've banned it, and it's because of its neurotoxic properties. Mercury is one of these metals that is capable of really messing with some of that brain tissue, some of that neural tissue that's up in your head, and so we've protected ourselves against it using policy mechanisms. There are a whole suite of other molecules, right? Other neurotoxins out there that are a function of environmental degradation and a changing climate in many different ways that unfortunately are not regulated.
Is the greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide, fossil fuels emissions, is that part of that soup?
Carbon dioxide, I don't think we'd consider to be a neurotoxin per se, but so much of what is released by the burning of fossil fuels, right? Particulate matter, air pollution is commonly understood. These really small molecules that effectively can hitch a ride on your nasal nerve and then cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain, right? That's the stuff that's really quite dangerous. And we would indeed consider something like PM 2.5, right? Particulate matter, air pollution. We would consider that to be neurotoxic.
Clayton Page Aldern is our guest, continuing the conversation after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump traveled to the town of Leland, Mississippi to demand that the police department release a dashcam video showing a patrol vehicle fatally striking a 17-year-old boy. The incident happened March 21st. According to family members, Kadarius Smith, who is African-American, was attempting to run away from police on foot when an officer allegedly ran him over with an SUV, leaving tire marks on his back. With Weekend 1 already in the books, the music festival Coachella in California is the most popular festival in the U.S. Online gambling company Betway analyzed the most popular festivals based on search volumes in the past 12 months. Coachella came out on top with over 3 million searches in the past year. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
True Green is the easiest and most affordable way to get a beautiful lawn. All you have to do is water and mow. And to top it off, when you sign up for an annual plan by April 20th, you get one application free. Call or visit truegreen.com today. Restrictions apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers answered the challenge last night in New Orleans and got out of the play-in round. They held on for a 4-point win to clinch the 7th seed in the Western Conference playoffs. The win set up a first-round matchup with the defending champion Denver Nuggets. Game 1 is Saturday in Denver. LeBron led the Lakers with 23 points, 9 assists, and 9 rebounds. The Lakers really helped themselves by making 26 of 29 free throws. New Orleans will host Sacramento Friday night. The winner gets the 8th seed in the West. Sacramento beat Golden State last night. We may have seen the end of an era with Golden State's early elimination. Steph Curry is 36 and Klay Thompson is a free agent. Thompson was 0 for 10 from the floor in perhaps his last game with Golden State. Thompson, Curry, and Draymond Green won 420 games together and 4 NBA championships. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare?
If so, the new LA Care plan called Medicare Plus can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0.
LA Care provides personalized service to Angelinos like us.
Plus, it gives us access to doctors and specialists across Los Angeles County.
For zero cost, we get access to full benefits.
From vision coverage,
in-home support services,
to prescription drug coverage
and a quarterly over-the-counter allowance,
plus personal equipment,
meal programs,
a gym membership,
and so much more.
For more than 25 years,
LA Care has provided Angelenos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost.
For our families,
our seniors,
our community,
it's a plus.
It's a plus
for all of us.
Hi, I'm Henry Winkler. My eyes are very important to me. My eyes connect me with everything I love. I loved my late father-in-law dearly. He always lit up a room, but his vision dimmed with age. He had age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. And since partnering with Apellis, I've learned there's an advanced form of dry AMD called geographic atrophy, or GA. His struggle with vision loss made me want to help others know about GA's warning signs. For some, colors appear dull or washed out. For others, hazy or blurred vision make it hard to see details, like fine print on price tags. Many have trouble seeing in the dark, making driving at night difficult. GA gets worse over time and cannot be reversed. If you think you have GA, don't wait. Treatments are available. Ask a retina specialist about FDA-approved treatments for GA and go to GAWon'tWait.com.
Some days I cover up because of my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now I'm hitting the road with clearer skin thanks to Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieved 90% clearer skin at 4 months. And Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing on my skin, and that means everything. Ask your doctor today about Skyrizi, the #1 dermatologist-prescribed biologic in psoriasis, and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZZI to learn more.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
As usual, you're always invited into the conversation at 800-920-1580. We're talking with Clayton Page Aldern. He's a neuroscientist turned environmental journalist. He's been published in The Atlantic, The Guardian, The New Republic, Vox, and more. He is a senior data reporter at Grist. And the book out now, The Weight of Nature, How a Changing Climate Changes Our Brains. Actually, you know, the more I read about the impact of these neurotoxins and all the various pollutants into our bodies, the more amazed I am, Mr. Aldern, that our bodies are in as good a shape as they are. I mean, I think it's pretty remarkable what we can adapt to, and the fact that we keep functioning despite, you know, these studies showing we've got all these microplastics in our bodies and all kinds of strange chemicals in the food that we may not know how to process. We keep on keeping on.
Yeah, you know, we really do, right? The human body and the human brain, these are really incredible facets of nature, right? The fact that we can adapt at all is a little bit of a miracle, right? And so I think in the context of some of the changes in the environment that we're witnessing, there is this natural question, right? Like, well, how much can we adapt away? How much
right.
can we adjust to, given the fact that, well, hey, we've made it this far. What more can we do without necessarily changing our behavior? And we have some semblance of an answer there. You know, I think that when epidemiologists, for example, have looked at this question, they've basically estimated that if you kind of press the fast forward button on climate change and you look at the year 2100 or something and ask what kinds of health effects are people going to be experiencing as a function of climate change, as a function of rising temperatures and severe weather and exposure to things like air pollution and rising carbon dioxide levels and all the manners in which these environmental stressors act on human health, how much of those effects can we reasonably expect to adapt away? How much can we adjust to? And the best estimates we have right now are, well, maybe about half of it. Maybe our bodies can handle about half of what is to come in the coming decades. But unfortunately, we can't adapt to all of it. And so, we need to do more than simply wait around for evolution to help us out.
Yeah. Or, what I used to love to say and made myself stop saying, which is, well, Generation Z, they're brilliant. They're going to save us. Generation A, they'll figure it out. The scientists are going to save us. And I don't want to be fatalistic either, because I feel like, I am the mother of a Gen Z child. And when you get to this point, which some of them are already at, which is there's nothing we can do, or whatever the common refrain is, we're 8 years away from the point of no return. What's the use? If the corporations don't do anything to curb their emissions and usages of these toxins, there's nothing we can do, because my little recycling isn't going to make a difference, and most of recycling turns out to be a scam at this point anyway. So what's the use? We're all just going to burn in hell on earth. That's not where I want to go.
Right. Well, and I think that kind of fatalism, that kind of pessimism, can be really common, and unfortunately for good reason, right? In part because it is true, right? There's not one thing that one person can do to solve the climate crisis, right? Switching to compostable straws isn't going to do it. And so there is this natural question, well, hey, given that it is going to take really serious governmental action, given that it's going to take really serious industrial action, right? Big systemic change to confront this problem, what is it that I, as an individual, might be able to do in support of a livable future at all? And my answer there is, I think it really has less to do with how is it that individual people are going to solve the climate crisis per se, and more, what is it that we as individuals can do to ensure that we as individuals are living our best lives, right? How is it that we can support our own health, our own, including neurological health, our own resilience going forward, given the fact that even if the government banned fossil fuels tomorrow, the effects of climate change are going to continue to manifest for decades, right? We've already locked in a lot of the science here. We've already locked in a lot of these forcing effects of these pollutants on the climate. And so irrespective of government action, individual people, I think, ought to be thinking about what it means to be protecting themselves to the extent possible.
And I mean, also beyond protecting ourselves, do you think, one of the things you point out is that there's just not that much public conversation or public awareness around impacts of climate emergency in the public discourse beyond just, recycle, reuse, repurpose. Like that's about, and a lot of us have gotten disillusioned. We find out, well, nobody's really using this plastic. A lot of it is ending up back in dumps. So back to what's the use? I mean, what beyond our personal responsibility gives you hope, and how important is the discourse and the raising awareness around this stuff?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I mean, I write about a lot of scary stuff. I'm kind of on the apocalypse beat, right? I have to write about scary things all day, and the reason that I don't think that this needs to be exclusively a story of fear or of fatalism is because I actually think coming to terms with some of these effects, coming to understand the fact that a changing environment does change us internally, well, that should actually point us towards some really interesting truths about ourselves, right? That suggests that this boundary between the self and the rest of the world, it's really porous, right? It's not like we're somehow walled off from everything else. And I think so much of the thinking that goes into these ultimately really awful environmental catastrophes is motivated by a kind of understanding of people as being somehow separate from nature. And I think what we're learning is that has just never been true, right? There is no separate self outside of the environment, right? We are enmeshed in our environments, and therefore we should expect to change as the environment changes, because we are part of this world too. And I think when you come to terms with this idea of enmeshment and the degree to which, and I hate to say it because it's an idea that is repeated so frequently that it almost fails to mean anything. When you come to terms with the idea that everything is connected, I think we can actually do something with that kind of idea. I think that understanding that the world is capable of affecting changes within our bodies ought to also motivate us to remind ourselves that the actions that we take as people do affect the world as well, that boundary between the world and the self, it's just not as solid as we'd like to imagine it is.
Yeah. We were talking about that the other day when looking at these green amendments. Montana gets a green amendment. California's working on one. But if the state next door, is doing whatever they're doing, we are all breathing the same air. We are all connected. You can't build a wall. You
can't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, climate change doesn't really care about state borders. It doesn't acknowledge political boundaries, and what that implies, I think, is that we also need to be meeting this issue on slightly more existential terms, right? Slightly more abstract terms. You asked me, what gives me hope, and I don't love the feeling of hope. I think that hope can sometimes lead to a kind of complacency. If you think that everything's just going to be okay, then you're not going to do anything about it. And so instead, I'm kind of interested in other feelings that motivate me. I'm interested in desire.
I'm laughing, but you're right. Urgency over hope, right?
No, totally.
Yeah,
I want to look toward a future and be like, that's the thing that I want.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to try to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's not necessarily hope. That has more to do with desire and future orientation and being able to see oneself in a livable world and imagining the steps that it's going to take to get there.
Yeah. Yep. Do you want to have hope or do you want to have a plan? 800-920-1580. Continuing our conversation with Clayton Page Aldern when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
We ask seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well-trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your Senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
America has an important decision to make in 2024. Who will lead the nation in these stressful yet monumental times? Business leader and Lakers co-owner Johnny Buss has a plan for America. Join us on Thursday, April 8th at 11 a.m. as Johnny Buss shares a new path forward for America and announces his independent candidacy for President of the United States. Thursday, April 18th, 11 a.m. on Kareem Court, just near the fabulous Forum. Listen to the vision, witness history. Register today at bus2024.com. America finally has the right choice. Paid for by Bus for America 2024.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
And talking with Clayton Page Aldern, the weight of nature, how a changing climate changes our brains. You know, I said to you, well, I always think of it in terms of my body, as if my brain was somehow not connected. Brain connected to the body, body connected to the environment, the planet. And yet, a lot of this conversation is not happening. Tell me what it was that drove you to write this.
Well, I used to work as a neuroscientist. I don't anymore. And one of the reasons I left the lab is because it didn't feel particularly connected to the rest of the world. I spent my days looking at a computer screen and modeling brain networks. But that wasn't the same thing as engaging with the richness of these ideas in the real world. And ultimately, I think my dissatisfaction with the manner in which I was spending my time was that which led me to think about how I might be able to take some of these ideas out of the lab and bring them into conversation with real people, right? As opposed to some kind of theoretical discourse that was playing out on a computer. So, that was the first step. And I think the second step was once I had gotten into environmental journalism, I had an editor ask me, well, hey, you used to be a neuroscientist. Surely you've got some kind of series within you on this is your brain on climate change. Why don't you write that for me? To which I responded, I don't know about that. This was 7 or 8 years ago, and I had just left neuroscience. And neuroscience research is so easily sensationalizable, right? It's one of those things that, as a journalist, I think you need to be really careful about reporting on, because it can be really alluring to take an article and say, oh, wow, this sounds really impressive. I want to write up these results because of the manners in which it reflects a greater truth about humankind.
Right.
But so much research doesn't have that possibility. So much research is a very, very specific statement about the world or about the brain, and to make a general truth out of it, you can alienate some of your neuroscientist researchers out there who are doing very careful work. And so I was hesitant to go on this trail. I was afraid of alienating my former colleagues. But when I did begin to pull at those threads, the initial investigations on the relationships between heat and violence, or between heat and critical thinking, right? Heat and cognition, or between extreme weather and post-traumatic stress disorder, or the relationship between even something like mountaintop removal mining, right? Drastic landscape change and major depressive symptomology, right? As I began to pull at these threads, it became clear to me that there was a broader narrative here that was worth seeing through. And so this book is the result of the, 6 or so years of research that followed.
I mean, honestly, as a radio talk host, we sit here and opine about all kinds of things. It's always tempting to do that. Oh, well, this means that, and everyone in the world should think this or do that. But that said, as someone who knows a lot about neuroscience, as a journalist and as a scientist yourself, are there things that you do and don't do to protect your own brain or the brains of those you love in the current environment that we're living in?
Well, listen, I have asthma, for example. And so when it's particularly muggy out, and that mugginess interacts with air quality in a way that makes it hard to breathe, I'm probably just not going to go outside, right? And if I do, right, if there's a wildfire around the corner and it's really smoky out, I'm probably going to be wearing some kind of serious mask. And that's because, again, this air pollution stuff really matters, right? That's where some of the science is just incontrovertible. Low air quality is really bad for our neurological health. And so to the extent that we can be careful about how we're interacting with poor quality air, which might mean ensuring you have some kind of air filtration system in your home, right? Ensuring that you're not going outside when there's a wildfire nearby, right? Those are some really basic core considerations that you can take into account to ensure that this kind of stuff isn't affecting your health on a long-term scale. But more generally, things like air filtration and air conditioning, right, and masks and nose plugs, all this kind of stuff, it's kind of a stopgap, right? It's not the solution to the problem. And even at the individual level, I do think that there are some things that we can do to bolster our neurological resilience, but I think also to a certain extent our psychological resilience. And for me, that looks a lot like borrowing from some of the tools of either various cognitive therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapy, or indeed borrowing from some of the tools of mindfulness practices, right? I think that so frequently something like mindfulness, right, meditation and this kind of active presence in one's life, noticing the world around us and the manners in which it is affecting us, being able to name those experiences and effectively notice our reactions to them and then move on, right? I think something like mindfulness is very frequently talked about in kind of new agey, squishy terms, but a lot of really great neuroscience suggests that those practices, they really matter in terms of ensuring that our neural circuitry is set up to succeed, right? So much of environmental stress is about, basically ensuring that our brain is operating in a less coordinated manner. And mindfulness appears to basically help us hit the reset button. I'll give you just one example, which is that people who experienced the campfire in California a couple of years back have a greater likelihood of presenting with post-traumatic stress disorder. But the specific manner in which that PTSD appears to affect their cognition, it actually looks a lot like ADHD insofar as these people are more distractible. If you give them a series of cognitive tests and look at the specific manners in which their cognition has been hampered by this climatic trauma, it's that they appear to be more prone to distraction than they were before. And what do we know about the treatment of ADHD? We know that this kind of future-oriented mindset, we know that mindfulness practices that, ground somebody in the present and compare that person to their future selves, right? Being able to kind of project oneself into a world in which your decision-making looks different, or you are more focused and less distracted. You're aware of where the triggers of distractibility enter your life, right? These mindfulness practices are really beneficial, both for folks with ADHD writ large, but also those who experience climate trauma and then have some kind of symptomology that looks a lot like ADHD in terms of these distractibility findings. So I think mindfulness really matters insofar as the toolkits that we have out there that are different from pharmacology, right? Different from just popping a pill, for example. They do appear to have real effects on the brain and real therapeutic effects that are beneficial for the kind of biophysical resilience that I think we need to be cultivating within ourselves.
Clayton Page Aldern, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We could talk for hours. Tavis Smiley is up next. He's got a full lineup of shows for you today, and I will see you tomorrow, of course. I'm Dominique DiPrima. History is now, and we are making it together. Until Thursday, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump traveled to the